Hey, man.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. Calvin, could you hit the... So to answer your question, because I'll forget. Yes, so the B6200 supports VTL as well as NAS. The only thing that's different between the B6200 model and the other models is that it does not support high SCSI, fiber channel, and NAS interface only, so Ethernet. So I'd have to be honest with you, this is really strange for me to talk about data protection and data protection products, and the sun is still out. Usually it's the end of the day, everybody's tired, so this is really nice. All right, so unlike Brad, I do have slides because I'm not nearly the artist in caliber that Brad is. But there's this kind of a complex, and I want to make sure that you understand what we're doing. So just to kind of look at the B6200, I won't go into much of the Store 1 implementation in terms of deduplication and replication, because that alone could take hours. We usually give sessions, training sessions, that go 4 or 5 hours just on deduplication alone. So, but I'll try to answer basic questions if you have it. So this is really our first scalable product for data centers. So this is a fan out, right? Uses all HP components, and we've talked about before that it's all HP internal development and leverages some of the iBricks code on the back-end Linux system. It scales to a maximum of 512 terabytes of usable storage. You can start with a single couplet, is what we call, and I'll get into that in a second, and scale it. Now, as you start to scale, that's when you'll really start to see your performance increase. So if you have a single couplet, you won't be getting the 28 terabytes an hour. Instead, you'll be getting 7 terabytes an hour when you start increasing your couplets. So resilience, so this is where Craig indicated autonomic. You're going to see that with the B6200. This has autonomic failover, which means that if you lose a node in your couplet, it will automatically fail over and continue the backup job. Shared storage, so you can take and divvy up the storage between multiple VTLs or multiple NAS shares. And ideal target for remote sites for disaster recovery. So that's we talked a little bit about replication and using B6200 in the main data center, where your remote offices may have other D2Ds that can replicate into that. Calvin, next slide, please. All right, so for the couplet, what a couplet consists of is 2 nodes, node 0 and node 1. They're based on the ProLiant server. You can see it's got hex-core CPUs, a lot of processing power in there, and 96 gig of RAM. It supports the fiber channels. We've got 2 8 gig out the back. We also have 4 1 gig and 2 10 gig network ports. The ILO 3. So even though you'll find that in the servers themselves, if you just deploy the server, we actually utilize that for helping determine if the node goes bad or not. So the ILO 3 port is not used for remote administration like it is just in the server platform. And we have the system disks built in, so the operating system is not stored on the back-end storage, and it's all 6 gig SAS going into the P2000 G3s. Okay, next slide, please, Colin. So here's where we start adding in our couplet the 2 nodes. We do a balanced addition of our disk arrays. So obviously, if you're going to have kind of a clustered system, you want to have your storage being added in the same capacity. So whenever you add one enclosure to this node, you'll add another enclosure to this node, and you'll build up so you can have a total of 4 shelves on each node.
Wait, enclosures are owned by...
I'm sorry.
Enclosures are owned by nodes in the couplet?
Yeah, but they can be shared in a single couplet. We'll get into that. We'll get into that. Next slide, Cal. Okay, so what a couplet looks like is you have a node, and then you have the storage behind it. So you'll have 1 controller, and then potentially 3 JBODs on each side. So what we've done then is we've connected them together through the back end. Now the back end is all virtually connected. So when you deploy your first couplet, what you see is after it's all been wired and installed, when you go to log in, it asks you, what do you want for a template? And what a template is it allows you to pick, well, I want to use 10 gig for my data path and 1 gig for management. So there's 4 different templates that you can deploy. Once it does that, the wizard will automatically virtualize the back end and take care of all the configuration between this. There's nothing that the administrator would have to do on the back end to get these things to work in a clustered environment. It's all handled by the operating system itself, the management. So once you have, so what I'll do is I'll focus in on a cluster, or on a single node. What you have then is you'll be able to create VTL or NAS, and you'll also be able to replicate to this single node. And the same thing is true on the other node within the couplet. You can have a separate NAS share in a different library. Okay, it's completely customizable. Now, these couplets are managed in a single management console that goes across both of the nodes. And it's leveraged off the Fusion Manager off the X9000. So there's constant communication going on between that, and we call that a service set. A service set is always kind of replicating data in terms of management data in case one of the nodes goes down, to be able to switch over. And we'll get into that in just a minute. Okay, so when you have these two couplets, you have the storage on the back end, but now each node within the couplet can access each other's storage. So when you go to configure a B6200, you can balance your storage utilization. You can say, well, I want this node here, which can do about 3.5 terabytes an hour, to handle this and store it here. So I want just 64 terabytes here, and then I'm going to balance it here, 64 terabytes here, and I'm getting, roughly 3.5 terabytes an hour throughput. But what I can also do is I can just have this this node just be a failover and just put everything here on this node and use 128 terabytes of storage on the back end. So what happens is it uses the first 64 terabytes that it has direct access with the 6 gigabit link. But when you start coming over here, then it goes through the 10 gigabit link to access the data on this array.
Okay, but if that node fails, I lose access to that.
No. So when this node fails, let's see, Calvin, could you do the next slide?
When node 2 fails.
Right. So if one more, please. Right. So if this guy fails right here, what happens is that with the service set communicating, it says, okay, I'm going to wait. Oh, you're dead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take over, and I'm going to manage the data. And so it's going to switch over. The service set's going to switch. It knows where that data resides on this, and it's going to access that data not through SAS. It's going to access it through the 10 gig network. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. What doesn't make sense?
That node storage is a SAS JBOD, right?
It is a SAS, but it's also got, through the P2000, it's also connected through network, 10 gig network on the back end.
So it's dual connected?
Yes.
Okay.
It's all redundant. The B6200 is completely redundant on that.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I'm trying to understand how.
Oh, okay.
So I've got a disk shelf. It's got the RAID controllers in it, so it's not a JBOD, right?
Yes, it's got the RAID controllers in there, right?
Okay, and it's SAS connected to node 2.
Correct.
And it's 10 gig connected to some 10 gig fabric that connects all of these nodes together.
Correct, on the back end. Yeah.
Node 2 fails.
Yes.
Node 1 takes over its processes.
Yes.
Node 1 then talks iSCSI to that cabinet over the 10 gig?
That I don't know. I don't know if it's iSCSI that it communicates with. I'm not sure what the protocol is. It's over the network, but I'm not sure which protocol it uses.
It's directly connected to the JBOD.
Yes. That's how it accesses that back end.
But it's not a JBOD, it's a RAID in the tray.
Yeah.
Okay, the RAID controller. It's directly
Yeah.
connected to the RAID controller to the 10 gigabit in one pass, or through a SAS bus in the other.
So each of those
It's a
trays
pretty
in
odd.
itself
It's a
is
pretty
storage
odd
bus.
configuration, actually.
Yeah, so when we go and do the lab tour, there's B6200s in the lab, and we can take a look at that back
You
end.
just power one down and see how it works.
Well,
Yeah,
A
well,
little smoke out, come out.
yeah. I mean,
We can use a chainsaw for that.
all right, so what we have is, when we have the one couplet and the service sets, everything I've explained, now we can expand that out, and we can go to a maximum of 4 couplets, where each couplet has 2 nodes. So this is where you're going to see your performance as well as your capacity.
And if a full couplet dies,
Now, if the full couplet dies, you lose access to that data.
that
Yeah,
data
so
behind
we
it.
don't.
So even though it might be connected to the 10 gig Ethernet network, it's
Right,
not
so-
accessible.
Yeah, the couplets don't communicate across couplet boundaries yet.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so all the data resides within the single couplet at this point in time.
okay, so a target, VTL or NAS belongs to a couplet, and its data belongs to that couplet. So is each couplet a deduplication realm?
Yeah, so the store once engine runs on both couplets, right?
Right, no, but if I have a full-blown system
Right.
with 8 nodes, is that 4 deduplication realms, or is that 1 deduplication realm?
4 deduplication realms at this time. Yeah, so deduplication
only
is,
within couplets.
so you're using the same deduplication engine across all nodes within all couplets, right? The only thing is that the deduplication does not span across couplets.
Yeah.
So each node, even though it's using the deduplication and writing here, it's the same algorithm for this couplet to understand and be able to restore, right? So it's the same data store
Right.
that it's pulling from, knows how to read it. At this point, we do not cross couplets with deduplication.
How does
So-
replication play in that, though?
So like if you're doing a fanning, so you can select.
Well, even, let's say you replicate couplet 1 to couplet 3. Is the deduplication realm still separate between couplet 1 and couplet 3?
Yeah. So if you're replicating to couplet 3, the data is going to be sitting here. Because you're running the store once deduplication engine here on this node, it understands how the deduplication is working because it's the same engine being sent from your source to
Right,
your
but
target.
if you replicate from 3 to 5, it-
1 to 3.
from 1 to 3, it's going to be replicated, deduplicated, but the data is going to be stored on couplet 1 and on couplet 2. You'll have
And there'll be
still
separate deduplication realms.
separate deduplication realm.
But you're only going to replicate the
You only
index
repli-
entries and any non-present blocks.
Right.
Any
But what about
non-present
cross-replicating
blocks.
1 to 3? Now you've got the same exact data on 1 and 3,
Right.
but they're still separate deduplication realms.
Yes.
Yeah.
At this point.
So what we've got here is 4
Appliances.
four storage systems with 1 common management interface across them.
Yeah.
That's correct.
But all the data paths are coupled, for the data flow is all per couplet.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, at this point in time.
So if we wanted to maximize deduplication, we want to make sure that, all of our Windows web servers would all go to the same service set. So they'd all be within the same couplet, so therefore they would all be deduped together.
That's correct, and that's in our best practices guide is to do that type of thing. So take like data and save it in the same BTL or in the same share to get the best deduplication ratio.
Okay, so you just opened the door for, so it's not really, is it each couplet is a deduplication realm? Or is it
Yes.
each target is a deduplication realm?
No.
Because in the best practices guide for the 4300,
Right.
it says for best performance, set up a lot of targets and send individual streams to each target, but that each one of those targets is a separate deduplication realm. So I have to trade off performance and deduplication efficiency.
Right, so now the performance, the guideline is usually meant for replication, right? So if you are sending all of your data to one VTL and you're replicating that data, then what happens is that's a lot of data for that one library to send off, and especially when it's deduplicating. So if you're sending your data to multiple shares or multiple VTLs, the performance helps with replication because it
Oh,
has
but
just a small
not
amount.
ingest performance?
In just performance, it shouldn't matter if it's going to a single VTL or a single NAS share. Your VTL performance, it doesn't look at the shares of VTLs for performance. It just looks at the more data streams that you pass along to it, the better the performance is going to be.
Okay, we need to talk about that.
Yeah,
also.
that's fine. Okay. Any questions?
When you replicate data, do the systems have to have the same interface as BTL and NAS? And do those interfaces, are they cost separately or licensed separately? Or
Right, so for licensing on the Store Once products is deduplication is enabled. There is no licensing fee. It's all part of the package. Replication is a licensed feature. When you go to set up your replication, you can set up using the replication wizard that's built into the management interface on the node, or we've got a single management interface here, and you can set up your replication on any of the couplets or any of the nodes within that couplet. When you set up like a VTL library as a source and it's going to replicate to a target, it'll need to go to a library. And the same thing with NAS. You can't cross between
Okay.
VTL and NAS. But there's no licensing for either
No, so-
emulation. It's all included.
When a node and a couplet fails, does the other node assume it's WWNs and such?
It does. It takes over everything. And so right now, for the autonomic failover, we support Data Protector, Symantec, Net Backup Exec, and we're working on Networker. So what'll happen is if, for example, one of the node fails, there's a certain timeout, and you'll have to set up using the scripts, and it's in our best practices guide that's going to be published soon on the B6200 on how to set all these scripts up for this autonomic failover. And once the timeout kicks for the node, it'll automatically take all the worldwide names and so forth, or NAS share locations, and switch that over using the service set. Now, when it comes time to repair the node or whatever, then that's a manual failback. You'll have to manually go back and set everything up and fail that back over.
Now you mentioned that the B6200 does not support iSCSI,
Correct.
but you could replicate like an iSCSI VTL to one of your other systems, the 4300 or something like that, to the B6200, as long as it's running VTL.
Yeah, because when you're replicating between DDDs
Yeah.
or store one systems,
Yeah.
it's using the network protocol.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's using the Fibre channel or the iSCSI interface is more of a host configuration.
Right.
So,
And at the scale, the people who are going to buy something of this scale aren't big iSCSI users.
that's right. I think I covered that faster than I expected.
We didn't ask enough questions, though.
Any questions on anything else?
So when you have a VTL interface and a NAS interfaces, are they, within a couplet, they're all part of the same deduplication realm, though? The data itself is still...
Yeah, so what happens is
Is it intermixed?
when you log into a node, let's say we log into node 1 and we create VTL2.
Yeah.
That VTL2 contains its own data store for deduplication. If you go ahead and create VTL number 1, that VTL number 1 has its own deduplication store. They're not shared across the VTL libraries at this point in time. So each library has its own dedupe store. So if you're backing up data to independent data here, you won't see these two libraries connecting together and saying, oh, we've got common data, and it won't dedupe that. So each store will say, oh, I've got like data, I dedupe. I've got like data here, I dedupe, and that's it.
That's too bad.
Yeah, so that's how it is today.
So before you said that each couplet had its own deduplication realm, the couplet itself. But now you're saying each library and each NAS head effectively has a deduplication data store to itself.
Right, so when I say deduplication realm, when we look at, it's the nodes. So you've got two nodes in a couplet, right?
Yeah.
So each node is running the deduplication engine, right? So if you create your VTL on node 0, when you create that library, it creates a folder structure in the directory, right? And so when you're writing data to that, the deduplication engine on that node looks at that folder structure and then dedupes on that folder structure. Okay. And then when you create a NAS share, it has its own separate structure, and it does deduplication on that folder section. But the same thing happens also on node 1, but it doesn't cross.
Okay, see, when we use the term deduplication realm, we mean the set of data across which data is deduplicated.
Yeah, so you're talking more global deduplication.
So if I say a deduplication realm, then any duplicate data I put in that deduplication realm should only be stored once. That the term means the realm across which data is deduplicated.
Yeah, okay.
And so if I create 2 NAS shares and 2 VTLs in one appliance, that's 4 deduplication realms, because if I send the same data to all 4 of them, it's going to take up the space of... Okay.
Correct.
And the replication component is yet another deduplication realm. If you're replicating from something to the B6200, it's got its own replication realm associated with it.
Yeah, because it's going to go through that. So if you're replicating from here to here, it's going to go through the server, right? That's already been deduplicated, and go to another server that's understands deduplication, and write to that folder structure that already exists, which is a replica.
But if I've got, let's say, multiple 2500s replicating to a 6200, you're not going to do global deduplication across all the replicated data for that, let's say 10 4100s or 4300s or something like that. You're only going to do deduplication. Well, A, you're only sending over deduplicated data in the first place. But there's not going to be any crossing of that replication data folder, let's say, to another data folder and deduplicate across it.
That's correct. Now, the only way that'll do is if you're actually replicating from two source locations, library VTL1 and VTL2, and you're replicating into a single library. So instead of replicating to multiple libraries on a target, you're actually replicating to a single library, then those will dedupe.
Oh, so you can configure multiple
On the VTL,
replication activities to the same NAS head or the same library.
You could, yes.
And in that case, it would dedupe across
That's
those.
correct.
Ah.
That's correct.
So the amount of data reduction you're going to get is very dependent on setup.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in that case, like couplet 1A there, it really has two separate libraries it's replicating to. You don't know if it's a library or an asset from this.
You mean for replication?
Yeah, you're seeing two replication blocks there. It's implying there's at least two replication streams coming into this system, maybe more, but there's at least two different libraries it's replicating into.
Yeah. So, but you can't cross between a NAS share and a VTL when you set that up. It's a
No, I
NAS to
understand.
NAS.
So it's all VTL or all NAS, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't mix and match. Great questions. I probably should have went more into store once deduplication and replication before talking about the 62.
Can any of the boxes be a source or like a target for replication and for backup data? So if you have a remote site, it can back up that site and be a destination from another.
What about cascaded replication?
What do you mean by?
Well, you replicate, let's say somebody replicates to couplet 1 and couplet 1 replicates that data to couplet 5 or something like that.
Oh, so we call that, what do we call that? Steve?
Multi-hop.
Yeah, multi-hop. That's a good question. I don't have an answer.
I can't imagine doing that in a B6200.
Yeah, usually it's the final.
Usually it's like branch office region
Yeah.
headquarters.
It's actually a pretty interesting configuration for three-way disaster recovery where you need cascaded replication.
Yes, I think we do a multi-hop.
Right, but not within the same
Data
rack.
center.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But you're taking data from,
Yeah,
you're
I
taking
have
data
to-
and replicating it again, effectively.
Right.
Yeah, I know that's in our documentation. I just don't recall it.
Yeah, you go branch office, 50 branch offices replicate to a region, and then the region replicates to headquarters.
Yeah.
We also support what they call in-way, so you could basically back up and deduplicate and then replicate the site from A to B, and then you basically have data you're backing up in B and replicate that to site C, and then site C back to site A. So we've got that,
Sort of like
that
a
support
chain?
as well,
Yeah.
yeah. We call it N-way. So really, there are three ways that we do it today. I mean, obviously the one way is what Matt's been talking about, which is between two locations. You can either with the two locations, you can basically back up at one location and dedupe it over to the other location, or you can run backups at both locations and deduplicate it crosswise. And then the third, as I said, is basically this N-way where you could have 4 or 5 sites and basically replicate. Each site essentially is receiving target data from another remote site, and it's also generating its own source data.
So that also brings up a good question about licensing as well. So if you're using replication, anytime you're replicating to a target, that target requires a replication license. So if you're only using one store once backup system for a replication target, you only need one license. If your source store once fails and you replace it or fix it or whatever, you do not need to get a license to restore that data, obviously. So it's only target devices that need the replication licensing. So if you're doing the two-way replication, where you're backing up to one store once backup system, and you're backing up to the store once number 2 backup system, and you're replicating between that, you would need 2 licenses, 2 replication licenses.